we're back.
Yeah. And this is part 2 of 1 Corinthians chapter 15. Delaney brought up something in that you said, and another reason that it was good news for them is that was right then when he died. Only 3 days later, he came forward with his body.
Right.
So if he came forward as a ghost without his body, everybody says it's a ghost. He didn't do anything different. We've all seen ghosts because they believed in ghosts big time then.
Wow.
So he had to come back with the body that he died in. That includes the prints of the nails. So that is a major reason why Jesus came back with his body. And that's going to play into our discussion about resurrection as we go along.
Okay. It makes a lot of, I mentioned in between these episodes that this makes sense. And on this podcast, doing this, I've come to realize the point of Jesus, but it's taken this effort, even though I've heard it my whole life. It's taken this study for me to understand it. Because if you tell someone today, Jesus died and resurrected, which is what Paul says is the gospel. There's no, he lived, there's no context. It's just Jesus died and was resurrected. You're like, why does me believing that help me at all? Like, it's so abstract and far away, and I've just had so much trouble with that forever. You're
such a linear thinker. You are like, so what?
Which I think everyone is, or not everyone, but the society in general is like, why? That's such a weird thing that we have to do that. So,
and they say, why would his death mean anything? What does that mean? So what? You know? And there's so much hub and spoke wrapped into the resistance to that, that it fails in its delivery. And there's a reason for that. It's not absolutely correct. There's a better way.
That makes so much sense. I had a couple questions before we kept going on that I don't know where, first of all, I'm so confused that today there isn't more talk about the fact that hell will be over.
No.
Like, eternal hell, even if it hasn't been fulfilled, is not true.
No, it's not.
It's going, the hell that exists before he comes back is not eternal.
No, and the scripture makes that clear. The problem is we go by tradition. We don't go by the facts.
That in itself is like, why do you believe in hell? Like,
because
just
Jesus said you're going to go to hell.
Well, what? Okay, so what? But because I don't know this, what are the two? Where does the one come from, and how do you refute it with other verses?
Okay, that hell, about hell.
Yeah, hell being eternal.
Okay,
where does that one come from?
Because there are some words that are used in the Greek that are, like Jesus will say, where the worm never dies and the fire is never quenched.
Okay.
And so they take that literally, and yet we don't have one passage from the Greek that says it's eternal. All we have is that it's age abiding. It's relative to their age that it would exist. And the other thing is, when you assign eternality to afterlife punishment, the way to best understand it, in my estimation and many others, is that the punishment is coming from the one who's eternal. And so it's eternal punishment. It's not that the punishment itself is eternal, but that the punishment you're getting in the lake of fire is eternal. It's coming from him. And that's his fire that's doing it. So, but if you do a study, and I am so not alone in this, that's the thing that caused me to start to change, is greater scholars than me, they go through it all, and we have a book on it, and it will tell you, it's not eternal in the literal sense.
Wow.
But lazy Christians, when they read the scripture, they'll read, you're going to go to where the fire never ends. And so that's one thing. The other thing is, there was a place outside of Jerusalem that was outside the walls, and they would throw all the dead people and dead that didn't have a right burial and animals and all their garbage into it. It was called the Valley of Hinnom. And there's a myth, it may be true, but that was the place where the Jews actually sacrificed their children to the god Molech in the Valley of Hinnom. And there the fires burned day and night, and they threw their refuse in there to be consumed. And Yeshua, when he would talk about how are you going to escape the punishment of Gehenna, that's where that place was, Valley of Hinnom, Gehenna, the King James translators took Gehenna and they put hell.
My gosh.
So because they did that, and then Jesus said, where the fire burns forever and ever.
Okay.
Now, when Jerusalem was sacked by the Romans, the Jewish leaders who really respected the burial process of really being sacred and done in the right order, their bodies were cast into the Valley of Hinnom. So that's what he was saying. At the great destruction, how are you going to escape the judgment of Gehenna? But the translation turned it to hell. And so that, in addition to Augustine, who loved the idea of wicked flesh burning forever from the Catholic Church, instituted that idea. And then it's just gone on and rolled forth, and no one wants to take a look at it in reality and really do the work to see what it really says. That, and finally, the book of Revelation says hell gives up its dead. It's right there. But they always say, well, that hasn't happened yet. And then they go through and say, yeah, once it gives up its dead, they're judged and they're thrown in the lake of fire, which is another version that they don't really understand or explain. So that's how hell got all of its legs and continues to be perpetuated among people who just want to believe that there's this burning place that all evil people who don't believe in Jesus are going to go.
Okay. And the lake of fire, was a thing for the people then.
It was a thing made
after.
for Satan and his angels.
First made for that.
That's who it's made for.
Okay. But there are people that go there.
Yeah, and they take their part in it.
Okay.
Which suggests it's the purging.
And
brimstone.
It could be temporary.
I am convinced that if those people then did that, or if people today outside the New Jerusalem want to go in, they will all experience that lake of fire, which is him. Why do I say that? Because Revelation says that the Lord and his angels is in the presence of the lake of fire.
Wow.
Yeah, it says that. So we know that it is a place that is for helping to cure and ameliorate disease and evil and sin, and not a place of punishment. You know? And we just read it all wrong and mercilessly. Yeah.
So, yeah. So the lake of fire does exist in fulfillment.
Well, it's not the lake of fire. I see it as the actual kingdom itself. Because when it talks about the lake of fire made for Satan and his angels, and the Lord and his angels are present in it, I think that is a place that I just see it as like a swimming pool outside the New Jerusalem, where all the evil spirits who had pure knowledge, pure sight, pure understanding, but rebelled anyway, were cast.
But when did that come up? Sheol, hell with the prison and the paradise ends.
Yeah.
The prison, you say, gives up its dead.
Yeah.
They're judged. They either go to the good place or the lake of fire.
Right.
So that whole, the good place and that lake of fire that happened then are technically what exists now, right? Or was there an end to that too?
I don't know about the lake of fire part, but for convenience sake and by virtue of conversation with Grady and people, all of us who read Revelation and have studied it tend to think that the lake of fire, you experience it here. Jesus came to baptize with the Spirit and with fire. You experienced his eternal fire purging you here in this life of your will and ways. Or you die, you go outside the city gates, and if you want to get in, you got to come into that lake of fire. That is God's presence. He is a consuming fire. Okay. So we move that lake of fire in Revelation that was used to the kingdom now.
Okay, yeah. But sorry to belabor it, but problem. It seems like when did that condition that you're describing that you believe in happen?
When Christ returned.
Okay.
Yeah.
So the prison giving up its dead to the new condition is the condition you're talking about. It's not the lake of fire is a thing that then evolves into what you're talking about.
It seems to me, I'm sorry to make it complex, but it seems to me like people are in Sheol prison. Jesus has taken his bride up into the New Jerusalem, where God and Christ dwell. They are the light thereof. Okay? It seems to me that then the people in prison, hell gives up its dead. They are judged before what's called the Great White Throne to see if their names are written in the books. And if they're not, they're cast into the lake of fire. Now, is that they're cast into the New Jerusalem? I don't know. I tend to think of it as being a separate lake of fire that existed for Satan and his angels, which is not part of the New Jerusalem. But I don't know. It could be wrong.
But you're saying that the lake of fire is like within or next to God?
I don't know about the lake
that?
of fire's location. Just put it that way. We don't know. We just know it was made for Satan and his angels, which seems to me like God's punishment on them directly. Does it mean Satan and his angels are in a lake of fire inside the New Jerusalem, which becomes the fiery place where God dwells? I don't know. That's why I said I just like to think of it as a swimming pool outside the gates.
Okay, wait. It seems like there are 3 lakes.
Ooh.
And what you're describing is 3 lakes, and that's what I'm I don't think you're saying that, but I'm misunderstanding. There's the lake that happens after people are judged at the Great White Throne.
Okay, do it chronologically. What was the first lake?
That lake.
Okay, there was a lake that was made for Satan and his angels.
So
That's
that lake of fire existed among Sheol existing in like all the Old Testament times.
It seems like this was created by God as a
Way
waiting
back.
place to throw them in.
Okay, so prison and paradise and then lake of fire. Yeah. Let's just
go ahead.
Geographically.
Middle
prison
fingers,
and paradise.
thumb is prison, okay?
Okay. Lake of fire. Yeah. Great White Throne. Okay.
Okay.
This, Jesus returns.
Yeah.
This, the people in paradise go to something else that's not the Great White Throne. Is that right?
I don't know where the Great White Throne is. It might be in that New Jerusalem.
Okay.
I don't know.
New Jerusalem is up here.
Okay.
So they go, paradise people go to
the New Jerusalem. Okay.
Prison people go to Great White Throne.
Nope. Prison people, go to the Great White Throne.
Get judged. They either go to New Jerusalem.
That's right.
Or they go to Lake of Fire.
That's right.
Which has always existed.
That's right.
You're saying that lake of fire and the New Jerusalem could be like in the same area.
Could be, maybe not. Could be separate, or it could be that the lake of fire created for Satan and his angels is in the presence of.
And then there's another that's at New Jerusalem where people get like purged.
Is another manifestation of it or application of it. It's quite possible, because this is all spiritual stuff we're talking about, that they're all one place.
Okay.
The Great White Throne, the New Jerusalem, the Lake of Fire, it's God.
Okay.
And it's not like maybe we don't even see those angels or see those people who are in prison having gone in there. It's just spiritually described, because that's all John could do. Okay.
But there's no place where it says the lake of fire ends in the same way Sheol ends.
I think there is a passage that says that it ends as well.
Okay. That's helpful. So then
I want to make sure about that.
Okay. Yeah, I'm curious, because would that mean that Satan's ends too with it?
It would be, yeah.
Wow. And then New Jerusalem, the options are like it functions in the way that the lake of fire did, and that purging happens somehow, or there is the lake of fire is actually in it and people go to that physically in order to
and all
those
of that
are the
is
options.
Assumption.
Okay.
That's all assumption by me and anyone else who thinks that way.
Okay.
Yeah. And the reason we think that is because Revelation says, describing the New Jerusalem, that God and Christ are the light thereof, there is no night, and the gates are open day and night for an outside and an inside. So the gates are open on all sides, 3 on each side. Why? It seems to me like God is victoriously calling. Listen, you didn't do it in your life, but if you're outside of this and you want to come. But it's not going to be painless. You know, you have a body, a resurrected body that can't handle what's going to be in here. Your resurrected body is not going to like this. And I think most people just say, I'm staying out, you know?
And what's the thing that you said is next to God? Or it's right next to God? I thought you said the lake of fire is next.
No, Revelation describes the lake of fire created for Satan and his angels as being in the presence of the Lamb and his angels.
Okay.
Now, that's a trip. I don't know what that means.
Okay.
Yeah.
The Lamb and his angels doesn't necessarily mean God? Or does it mean Jesus?
It when John writes Lamb, it means Jesus usually.
Okay.
Yeah.
So it's in the presence. So that could be that it's outside the gates, but like still in the New Jerusalem.
Could be.
Sort of, or like within the.
Yeah.
Okay.
And there's another wrinkle to it.
Okay.
And that is Satan, if you remember our discussions on that, is more of a title rather than a being. And so as a title, Satan could have been the religious leaders of Jesus' day. They embodied the spirit title of Ha-Satan. So it could be that Satan being cast into the lake of fire were all of them who put him to death, and he's in the midst of them.
My gosh.
Yeah.
Wow.
So there is another wrinkle is quite possible.
Okay.
You know, if you're trying to take all things into consideration.
And it says there's an end to the lake of fire.
Yeah, will you look it up? Just look up lake of fire, and it's only mentioned a couple times. I just want to say, it says, and the lake of fire was cast into.
Well, Google just says it does not indicate that, but what the lake of fire?
Just say lake of fire in the Bible, and you'll come up with a site instead of AI.
I feel like I should.
You're studying with us, folks.
And death and hell were cast into the lake of fire. This is the second death. And well, none of these say
That's it.
end.
That's it in Revelation.
No. Cast into the lake of fire. Where the beast
was cast into the lake of fire, verse 15. Where the beast and the prophet are, and tormented day and night forever and ever. Worship this lake of fire, burning with brimstone. Nothing about it being cast in.
Nothing about the lake of fire ending. That's what we're looking for.
Well, where I get that is that we're going to read in 1 Corinthians 15 that the death ends.
Okay.
And because he calls the lake of fire the second death,
right,
where they were cast into, it ends. I believe all death ends, and I believe the second death ends too. So therefore the lake of fire, because he calls the lake of fire a second death.
Yeah.
So that's where all the stuff happens.
Okay.
Woo! That was about 19.5.
It was 1906. Good job. His sense of time. Well, let's just move on to the next one.
Part 3 coming up.
Part 3.